In today's video, we're looking at the most horrific ways Karens died. From a woman who ignored escalator warnings to a subway rider whose aggression led to electrocution, these stories show how arrogance can have deadly consequences. It was August 19, 2016, when a routine grocery shopping trip in Mesa, Arizona, turned deadly for 49-year-old Carol Williams, a woman whose obsession with parking etiquette would ultimately cost her everything. Carol Williams wasn't just any ordinary shopper at the grocery store plaza in Mesa. She had earned a reputation as the parking lot's unofficial enforcer, someone who took it upon herself to police the behavior of fellow customers. Her mission was simple but consuming: ensure everyone followed proper parking etiquette. On previous occasions, Carol had made quite the spectacle of herself. She would follow SUV owners into stores, loudly demanding they move their improperly parked vehicles. She once blocked a store entrance for several minutes, announcing to bewildered customers that inconsiderate parking ruins shopping for everyone. When store management tried to intervene, Carol declared she was performing a public service and even threatened to organize boycotts against businesses that wouldn't support her crusade. Her methods were aggressive and confrontational. She would demand that store managers take down license plate numbers and permanently ban offending vehicle owners from parking lots. To Carol, this wasn't just about parking spaces, it was about justice, order, and doing what she believed was right for the community. That sweltering August afternoon, Carol had just finished her weekly grocery shopping. As she loaded bags into her car, something caught her eye that made her blood boil. A vehicle brazenly parked across two spaces in the busy weekend lot. The parking area was packed with shoppers, and Carol decided this transgression couldn't go unanswered. At exactly 2:45 p.m., Carol approached the offending vehicle with her usual determination. She had a note ready, prepared to deliver another lesson in parking courtesy. What she didn't notice was the teenage employee working nearby, collecting shopping carts with a motorized cart pusher. The cart collection equipment had been recently serviced, but the brakes weren't responding as sharply as they normally would. The young employee was managing a long train of carts, focused on his task and unaware that Carol had stepped between the parked vehicles. Focused entirely on writing her stern note about parking etiquette, Carol stepped backward without looking. She moved directly into the path of the approaching cart train just as the employee realized the danger and tried to stop. The reduced braking power of the cart pusher meant the momentum couldn't be halted in time. The lead cart struck Carol with enough force to knock her down onto the unforgiving asphalt. Her head hit the pavement with a sickening impact, and the weight of multiple carts rolled over her legs, causing immediate fractures. The parking lot fell silent except for the sound of scattered groceries and the employee's horrified shouts for help. Carol lay unconscious, her crusade for parking justice having led her to this tragic moment. Emergency services arrived within 10 minutes of the accident, their sirens cutting through the Arizona heat. Paramedics worked frantically to stabilize Carol, but the head injury was severe. She was rushed to the hospital where medical teams fought to save her life. 3 hours later, Carol Williams was pronounced dead from her head injury. The woman who had spent so much energy trying to correct others' behavior had become the victim of a tragic accident that could have been avoided. The grocery store responded by implementing comprehensive safety changes. New training programs were established for all cart collection employees, and the cart pusher maintenance schedule was completely overhauled. Additional safety mirrors were installed throughout the parking lot to improve visibility and prevent similar accidents. Perhaps most significantly, the store created a customer courtesy program designed to address parking issues through management intervention rather than allowing customer confrontations to escalate. Carol Williams' death serves as a sobering reminder that sometimes our desire to enforce rules and correct others can put us in harm's way, and that tragedy can strike in the most ordinary moments of our daily lives. It was June 22, 2016, when Whitney Collins's obsession with authority and viral fame would crush her to death at a Phoenix McDonald's drive-thru. Whitney, a 35-year-old middle school vice principal standing 5 feet 5 inches tall, had built her identity around wielding power over teenagers and service workers. Her red Honda Civic was equipped with phone mounts for filming confrontations, and she carried laminated credentials to intimidate anyone who questioned her authority. Whitney's vice principal Karen TikTok account boasted 8,000 followers who consumed her daily content of berating fast food workers and retail employees. She had perfected using her educational position as a weapon, constantly reminding people that she dealt with lying teenagers and knew insubordination. That Tuesday morning had been productive for Whitney's content creation. She had suspended 3 students for attitude problems, filmed herself screaming at a parent who questioned her methods, and posted about teaching respect to the next generation and their enabling parents. Whitney was infamous at this burger joint's location, having previously gotten 2 teenage employees fired by filming them and demanding corporate action. Her signature move involved exiting her vehicle during drive-through disputes to intimidate young workers while live streaming. When 17-year-old employee Jake Martinez informed Whitney that the ice cream machine was broken, she launched into her tirade about being a school administrator who dealt with lying teenagers daily. Her followers commented encouragement as she began her escalation routine. Unable to contain her need for dramatic content, Whitney exited her Honda Civic while leaving it in drive, live streaming as she approached the menu board. She began pounding on the structure while screaming about incompetence and threatening to shut down the establishment. To intimidate Jake and capture better footage, Whitney began violently shaking the 200-pound electronic menu board support pole. The structure had been loosened by Arizona windstorms, but Whitney was too focused on her performance to notice the dangerous swaying. The menu board couldn't withstand Whitney's assault and began toppling toward her as she continued filming. In her final moments, she was screaming blame at Jake when the metal structure struck her across the back with devastating force. Whitney was crushed between the falling menu board and her slowly rolling Honda Civic. Her spine snapped instantly while her ribcage collapsed under the weight. Internal organs ruptured as 200 pounds of metal compressed her 125-pound frame against the bumper. Her phone captured every horrific second as she was pinned and crushed. The footage showed her final accusatory stare at Jake, still trying to blame the teenager as her life ended. Jake Martinez quit immediately and required therapy for survivor's guilt, haunted by Whitney's final moments of blaming him. The school district investigated Whitney's conduct, revealing inappropriate interactions with students and parents documented on social media. Whitney Collins' death became the ultimate cautionary tale about Karen culture and deadly consequences of entitled behavior, proving viral fame isn't worth dying for. It was August 6, 2016, in Killeen, Texas. The evening heat pressed against the blacktop of a busy local mall parking lot, where carts rattled and engines revved as shoppers hurried in and out. The lot was crowded as usual, rows of cars packed tight with families weaving between them. It was routine chaos, until a confrontation turned into something irreversible. Diane Stokes, 47, was a familiar figure in Central Texas. She drifted through clerical jobs, but was known more for her sharp temper than her work. Employees at local stores recognized her as the type to argue at length over small inconveniences. She thrived on control, pushing conflicts further than most people would dare. She was also obese, carrying well over 200 pounds on her 5'4" frame, a fact that often left her winded with exertion but unwilling to admit any limitation. Parking lots, in particular, seemed to bring out her worst, an arena where she often called out other drivers and pedestrians for imagined slights. That evening, Diane parked in a middle row, returning later to find a stray shopping cart wedged against her sedan. Nearby, a man in his 20s was gathering carts into a line. Witnesses said she immediately confronted him, shouting that he had damaged her car. The worker tried to continue his task, ignoring her as he pushed the row of metal carts forward. Diane stepped in front of them, planting herself in the narrow lane. The carts, heavy with momentum, struck her thighs, causing her to stumble. Instead of moving aside, she grabbed the side rail of one cart, yanking hard. The sudden pull destabilized the line, and the front carts jackknifed. The metal frames lurched sideways, one striking her square in the chest. Her weight worked against her. Unable to regain balance quickly, her center of gravity shifted backward. She fell hard onto the sloped asphalt, the back of her head hitting the concrete with a sharp crack. The cart, still moving, rolled partially over her legs before the worker managed to stop them. Witnesses later described the sickening sound when her skull struck the pavement, followed immediately by a dark pool spreading beneath her hair. Her size made it difficult for bystanders to move her, several struggling before realizing she was unresponsive. Some screamed, others froze, while the worker frantically tried to lift the carts off her. Diane's body twitched once, then went still, her eyes open and unresponsive. Within minutes, paramedics arrived, but nothing could be done. Afterward, there was little sympathy. Shoppers who recognized her told reporters she was the same woman they had seen berating cashiers or blocking aisles for arguments no one else wanted. Her collapse was described less as a tragedy than as the natural end of her own confrontational habits. The mall returned to business within hours, quietly noting they would remember the incident more as a disruption than a loss. It was March 15, 2012, and Linda Morrison was doing what she did best, making retail workers miserable. The 52-year-old department store manager had just spent 45 minutes absolutely tearing into a teenage cashier over a $12 return at Westfield Shopping Center in Riverside, California. Linda's behavior that evening was textbook entitlement. She had berated the young employee relentlessly, demanding to speak with corporate headquarters and threatening to ruin the store's reputation online over a trivial policy dispute. Her voice carried throughout the store as she loudly proclaimed to other waiting customers that customer service was dead and the staff was completely incompetent. She wasn't finished there. Linda demanded the store manager provide written documentation of what she called policy violations and insisted on corporate contact information so she could file complaints with the Better Business Bureau. Her decade-plus experience as a retail manager had taught her exactly which buttons to push to make minimum wage workers squirm. After her exhausting 10-hour workday, this confrontation was just another Tuesday for Linda, who was known for her impossibly high standards and zero tolerance for anything less than perfection from service workers. As Linda rushed through the mall at 6:45 p.m., she was loaded down with multiple shopping bags and her oversized purse, wearing brand-new leather-soled shoes she'd purchased that morning. She was already running late to meet her husband for dinner, adding to her already elevated stress levels. The ascending escalator she approached had been making concerning grinding noises for 2 weeks. Maintenance requests sat unaddressed due to budget constraints, a detail that would prove crucial later. Distracted by a text from her husband about dinner plans, Linda stepped onto the escalator without paying attention. Her smooth leather soles found no grip on the recently cleaned, still damp metal steps. Near the top, physics took over. Her feet slipped completely on the wet surface, and as she grabbed desperately for the handrail, her heavy bags shifted her center of gravity backward. The momentum became unstoppable. Linda's head struck the sharp metal edge of an escalator step with devastating force, causing severe trauma that knocked her unconscious instantly. Her loose scarf became tangled in the escalator mechanism as panicked shoppers rushed to help. The emergency stop activated within 30 seconds, but Linda had already sustained fatal head trauma from the initial impact. Emergency responders arrived within 8 minutes, but she was pronounced dead at the scene due to a traumatic brain injury. The mall immediately shut down all escalators for safety inspections and installed additional warning signs. Investigation revealed the escalator met safety standards, but recommended more frequent maintenance schedules. The incident serves as a stark reminder that life can change in an instant, regardless of how much control we think we have over our circumstances. It was May 22, 2016, at the London Zoo in Regent's Park, England. The day was mild, the crowd steady, and families lingered at the exhibits. The lion enclosure drew clusters of visitors, children pressing against the rail to glimpse the animals pacing the grassy habitat below. By mid-afternoon, the routine hum of chatter would break under a scene that left witnesses shaken and staff scrambling. Patricia Walker, 56, had taken the train from her home in Watford for what she described to neighbors as a casual Sunday outing. Known among acquaintances for her sharp tongue, conflict for her was routine, asserting control in everyday situations where she felt ignored. She had no real history of risk-taking and outdoor activities, but in public spaces, she frequently pushed against rules and restrictions, dismissing them as unnecessary. The lion exhibit was designed with multiple safety layers. A low rail kept visitors back several feet from a concrete lip, beyond which a dry moat dropped roughly 12 feet into the enclosure. The animals, 3 adult lions, occupied an open savanna space with grass, boulders, and logs. Clear signage warned guests to remain behind the barrier, and staff at the station often reminded anyone who leaned too close. Still, incidents of guests attempting to stretch over the railing for better photos were not uncommon. That afternoon, Patricia grew irritated after a staff member told her to step back. She complained loudly, accusing them of spoiling her visit. Ignoring repeated instructions, she leaned over the barrier, gesturing toward the lions as she mocked their inactivity. Several visitors nearby shifted uncomfortably, one father with a pram moving his children farther down the rail. Despite the warnings and visible signage, Patricia remained fixated, eventually leaning too far forward. Her shoe slipped against the smooth concrete edge, sending her weight past the point of balance. She pitched forward with a sudden cry, flipping over the rail and tumbling into the dry moat. Gasps rippled through the crowd as she landed hard, rolling onto the dirt floor below. For several seconds, the enclosure was silent, the lions pausing at the unexpected intrusion. Then 2 of them charged. The male struck first, clamping powerful jaws onto her shoulder. Patricia screamed, thrashing against the dirt, while a lioness swiped with extended claws, tearing into her arms and torso. Visitors screamed, others shielding children's eyes. Zoo staff responded within moments, deploying air horns and high-pressure hoses. The lions hesitated briefly under the blasts of water, but the male did not release his grip. Patricia's body twisted unnaturally as he pulled, blood streaking across the dirt. Within minutes, her movement slowed, then stopped entirely. Staff escalated efforts, finally forcing the lions back with repeated horns and sustained water streams, long enough to lure them into a holding pen. Emergency personnel entered only after the animals were secured. Patricia was pronounced dead at the scene, her body bearing massive trauma consistent with mauling. Witnesses, still clustered behind the rail, were led away quietly, many visibly shaken. Her relatives avoided questions about the circumstances when interviewed during her funeral. In a press conference, officials emphasized that the victim had disregarded posted rules and staff instructions, underscoring the limits of what safety measures could prevent when warnings were ignored. The zoo reinforced the barriers in the weeks that followed, raising railings and adding additional signage. It was July 4th, 2017, when a dedication to community service turned deadly for 46-year-old Jennifer Walsh at Riverside Park in Portland, Oregon, a woman whose relentless pursuit of perfection would ultimately cost her everything. Jennifer Walsh was a dedicated community volunteer who helped organize the annual 4th of July celebration at Riverside Park. Her responsibility was coordinating vendor setup and ensuring all safety protocols were followed during the event. But Jennifer's approach had become increasingly confrontational and rigid. She had spent 2 hours berating food vendors about their setup locations, insisting they move their booths despite having approved permits for their current spots. Jennifer demanded that the live music be turned down during sound check, threatening to call police about noise violations, even though the event had proper permits. Her demands escalated as she confronted families setting up picnic areas, claiming they were violating official event protocols and demanding they relocate to less desirable spots. When other volunteers suggested she was being too rigid, Jennifer declared she was the only one who takes event safety seriously and threatened to report violations to the city. The park was hosting its largest Independence Day celebration in years, with multiple food vendors, live music, and fireworks planned. Jennifer was checking on the setup of a temporary stage structure that had been erected by a local rental company. High winds earlier in the day had caused some concern about the stability of temporary structures throughout the park. The weather conditions made Jennifer even more vigilant about potential safety issues as she conducted her inspections. At 4:30 p.m., Jennifer was inspecting the stage area when she noticed some loose securing cables that immediately raised her concerns. Determined to get a better look at the rigging system, she climbed onto the stage platform to examine the overhead mounting points more closely. As she studied the connections, a sudden gust of wind struck the temporary structure with unexpected force. One of the overhead lighting trusses, weighing 150 pounds, shifted under the wind pressure and broke free from its mounting system. The heavy truss fell approximately 15 feet through the air. Jennifer tried to move out of the way, but there wasn't enough time or space to escape the falling equipment. The massive truss struck Jennifer with devastating force, causing severe chest and head injuries that left her trapped under the twisted metal and lighting equipment. The woman who had spent her day ensuring everyone else followed safety protocols had become the victim of a structural failure. Other volunteers and emergency responders worked frantically to free Jennifer from under the heavy equipment. Within 8 minutes, they had managed to lift the truss and extract her from the wreckage. Jennifer was immediately airlifted to the trauma center, where surgeons fought to save her life. Despite their efforts, she died from her injuries during emergency surgery. The Independence Day celebration was canceled immediately following the accident. All temporary structures were immediately inspected as officials worked to determine if other equipment posed similar risks. The tragedy prompted comprehensive changes in how Portland handled community events. New safety regulations were implemented requiring certified engineers to approve all temporary stage installations before any event could proceed. The days of relying solely on volunteer oversight for complex structural safety were over. The community established an annual safety award in Jennifer's name for outstanding volunteer service, ensuring her dedication would be remembered while emphasizing the importance of professional safety standards. Jennifer Walsh's death serves as a sobering reminder that good intentions and dedication must be balanced with proper expertise, and that sometimes the very commitment that drives us to serve our communities can put us in unexpected danger. It was November 6, 2017 in New York City. The Union Square subway station was crowded with evening commuters, a familiar blend of impatience, fatigue, and routine. Announcements echoed against tiled walls, trains roared in and out, and footsteps filled the platforms. Among the hundreds passing through, one rider would not leave the station alive. Brenda Weiss was 54, a longtime New Yorker who had spent most of her career as an office administrator for a mid-level insurance firm. Known by colleagues as sharp-tongued and stubborn, she prided herself on standing her ground in any situation. Outside work, she lived alone in a small apartment in Queens and had few close friends. Public transit had been the background of her daily life for decades, but she was notorious among staff for confrontations, especially during service delays. The subway system itself is an unforgiving environment. Tracks lie in an open trough between platforms, with 2 running rails carrying the train and a third electrified rail powering it. That rail carries over 600 volts of direct current, enough to kill instantly. Platforms are lined with warning strips, and frequent announcements remind passengers never to enter the track area. Despite this, incidents occur every year, often the result of accidents, disputes, or poor judgment. That evening, Brenda was on her way home after work. Trains were delayed due to a signal issue, and the crowd at Union Square had thickened. Witnesses later reported she cut ahead in line as a packed downtown train pulled in, pushing past several younger commuters. When challenged, she raised her voice, escalating the argument into shouts. As the verbal clash grew louder, she shoved one rider who tried to block her path. The movement left her off balance at the platform's edge. In the chaos, her foot slipped against the yellow safety strip. She teetered, arms flailing, before tipping forward into the open trough. Gasps rippled through the crowd as she landed between the rails, her body inches from the electrified line. For a split second, she tried to push herself up, but her left hand made direct contact with the third rail. The effect was immediate and violent. A bright flash lit the space, followed by crackling sparks. Her body stiffened and jerked uncontrollably, muscles locked by the current. Screams erupted as the smell of burning cloth and flesh spread across the platform. Some commuters instinctively reached forward, tossing jackets and scarves, desperate to pull her clear without touching her directly. None of it worked. The current held her in place, coursing through her body until her movements slowed and stopped. Station staff triggered power cutoffs, but by then the damage was irreversible. When the current ceased, she collapsed awkwardly across the ties, smoke rising faintly from her clothing. Emergency medical teams were called by the staff, rushing down within minutes, but examination confirmed what witnesses already knew. She had suffered catastrophic burns and cardiac arrest almost instantly. The platform was cleared, trains rerouted, and police sealed off the area for investigation. Commuters were shaken, some still crying as they exited the station. Surveillance footage confirmed the sequence of events: the argument, the shove, the stumble, and the fatal contact with the rail. Unlike most transit fatalities that leave a community in shock, Brenda's passing drew little sympathy. Witnesses described her as combative even in her final minutes, screaming at strangers and forcing her way forward. Some commuters remarked afterward that her temper had written the ending as much as the third rail had. The station was cleared, power restored, and trains resumed service within hours. It was August 9th, 2017, and the Phoenix sun blazed mercilessly at 115 degrees as heat waves shimmered off the perfectly manicured lawns of Sunset Ridge subdivision. The upscale neighborhood's Spanish-style homes sat behind pristine landscaping, their red tile roofs reflecting the brutal Arizona heat, while automatic sprinkler systems worked overtime to maintain the HOA's strict aesthetic standards. The smell of hot concrete and desert dust hung in the still air, as most residents remained indoors during the peak heat hours. Margaret Thompson emerged from her air-conditioned home at 2 p.m., armed with a measuring tape, ruler, and violation notice pad that had become her weapons of choice. At 45, the Homeowners Association board member had appointed herself as the neighborhood's unofficial enforcement officer, conducting daily patrols with the intensity of a military inspection. Her garage contained filing cabinets filled with violation documentation, photographs of infractions, and a detailed map marking every property that had ever violated HOA standards. Margaret had been feuding with her neighbor Jim Rodriguez for 8 months over his lawn maintenance, issuing 17 violation notices for grass that exceeded the HOA's maximum height of 3 inches. She had purchased professional landscaping tools to ensure her measurements were legally defensible and had threatened Jim with daily fines of $50 until his lawn met community standards. Her obsession with grass height had consumed her life, leading to sleepless nights spent planning enforcement strategies. The scorching afternoon presented the perfect opportunity to build her case against Jim while he was at work. Margaret had been monitoring his watering schedule and knew the grass would be at its tallest after the morning irrigation cycle. She planned to document every blade that exceeded regulations, creating an ironclad case for the HOA board meeting scheduled for the following week. Margaret spent over 90 minutes in the blazing sun, methodically measuring individual grass blades with her ruler while the temperature climbed past 115 degrees. Her focus on documentation was so intense that she ignored her body's warning signs, the dizziness, nausea, and confusion that indicated dangerous heat exhaustion. Sweat poured down her face as she crawled across Jim's lawn, her notebook filling with precise measurements that she believed would finally end their dispute. As her core body temperature reached 104 degrees, Margaret became disoriented but continued her crucial work of grass measurement. She collapsed face down on the very lawn she had been obsessively monitoring, her measuring tape still clutched in her hand as heat stroke shut down her vital organs. Her body temperature soared to 108 degrees as she lay unconscious on the 3.2-inch grass that had consumed her thoughts for months. Jim discovered Margaret's body when he returned from work at 6 p.m., immediately calling 911 despite their ongoing feud. Paramedics pronounced her dead from heat stroke, with her violation notices scattered around her body like confetti. The HOA board was forced to acknowledge that Margaret had no legal authority to conduct property inspections, and her death led to policy changes requiring board members to work in pairs and avoid extreme weather conditions. It was June 3, 2013, when Patricia Chen's relentless pursuit of food safety truth would lead to a horrific end at Eugene, Oregon's downtown farmers market. Patricia Chen, a 47-year-old food blogger, had made exposing questionable vendor practices her personal mission. Known for her abrasive interrogation style and complete disregard for social boundaries, Patricia had earned a reputation as the market's most dreaded visitor. Vendors would cringe when they spotted her approaching, knowing she would monopolize their time with aggressive questioning while driving away paying customers. Her blog followers praised her dedication, but those who encountered Patricia in person found her insufferably self-righteous and confrontational. She treated every vendor interaction like a criminal investigation, showing zero empathy for small business owners trying to make a living. That Saturday morning, she arrived with her laptop, ready to document what she suspected were fraudulent organic certifications at the bustling market. Patricia cornered an organic produce vendor for a grueling 20 minutes, loudly questioning his certification credentials and demanding to see documentation, while frustrated customers formed a growing line behind her. Her voice carried across the market as she announced she was exposing fraudulent organic claims and threatened to report him to state agriculture authorities. When the vendor politely asked her to lower her voice, Patricia declared she had every right to protect consumers from his lies and began filming him without permission. She blocked other customers from approaching the stand, completely oblivious to their mounting frustration as she continued her interrogation. Market management approached her multiple times, requesting she move along, but Patricia dismissed them with the same arrogant attitude that had made her so many enemies. Her tunnel vision and obsessive need to be right blinded her to everything else happening around her. At 10:30 a.m., Patricia moved behind the delivery truck to photograph produce boxes, her attention completely focused on her camera screen. The same obsessive focus that made her so insufferable now put her in mortal danger. The driver, unable to see her in his blind spot despite having mirrors, began backing up. The truck's backup alarm had malfunctioned, but even if it had worked, Patricia's history showed she rarely paid attention to anything that didn't serve her investigative agenda. She remained absorbed in her documentation, unaware of the truck moving toward her until it was too late. The truck's rear bumper struck Patricia with devastating force, knocking her to the ground and causing multiple fractures. The rear wheel rolled over her lower torso before the driver realized what had happened and stopped. Patricia suffered severe internal bleeding and went into shock, but remained conscious, unable to move from where she lay. Paramedics arrived within 6 minutes of the accident and provided immediate medical attention, but her injuries were too severe. Despite their rapid response, Patricia died from internal bleeding while being transported to the hospital, her final investigation ending in tragedy. The farmers market immediately implemented new safety protocols, including designated vehicle routes and mandatory spotters for all deliveries. They installed backup cameras and proximity sensors on all delivery vehicles to prevent similar accidents. The truck driver faced vehicular manslaughter charges but was ultimately found not criminally liable due to the equipment failure that disabled the backup alarm. Patricia Chen's death became a tragic reminder of how obsessive behavior and disregard for surroundings can have deadly consequences. It was December 15th, 2013, and the Best Buy electronics store in Atlanta hummed with pre-holiday shopping activity as customers browsed the latest gadgets and televisions. The 45,000-square-foot showroom displayed wall-mounted TVs of every size, while sales associates helped families choose entertainment systems for their holiday celebrations. The customer service desk already showed signs of holiday stress, with returns and exchanges creating longer than usual wait times. Carol Johnson wheeled a massive box containing a 65-inch LED television toward the returns counter, her face set in the determined expression that Best Buy employees had learned to dread. At 44, the retail manager had ironically become the store's most notorious customer, exploiting return policies with the precision of a legal scholar and the persistence of a debt collector. Her home office contained detailed spreadsheets tracking return periods, warranty terms, and manager contact information for every major retailer in Atlanta. Carol had been returning the same model television to Best Buy every few months for over 2 years, claiming various defects to secure full refunds before purchasing identical replacement units. Store employees recognized her elaborate scheme, but were required to process returns that technically met policy requirements, despite their suspicions about her fraudulent activities. Her pattern had cost the store thousands in restocking fees and damaged merchandise write-offs. She had perfected her performance over dozens of returns, memorizing corporate policy language and practicing her outraged customer routine in front of her bathroom mirror. Carol's neighbors had grown suspicious of the constant delivery trucks arriving at her house, followed by her mysterious trips to various electronics stores with identical boxes. The electronics manager, familiar with Carol's history, requested additional documentation for her 6th TV return of the year. Carol's voice rose to a volume that attracted attention throughout the electronics department as she accused the staff of discrimination and threatened to post negative reviews across every social media platform and review website. Her face flushed red as she pulled out her phone, waving it menacingly while reciting corporate policy numbers she had memorized specifically for these confrontations. Carol grabbed the 80-pound TV box to demonstrate the obvious defects she claimed had appeared, dragging the heavy package onto the counter with effort. Fueled by anger, she tried to lift the front end of the box high enough to show the damage to the manager. Her arms shook violently under the weight, the cardboard flexing as she struggled to keep her grip. Mid-rant, her sweaty hands slipped. The 80-pound box toppled forward off the counter, striking her shoulder and forcing her violently off balance. Carol stumbled backward and lost her footing on the tile floor, falling hard and striking the back of her head. The combined impact of the box and her fall caused a loud, sickening crack that echoed through the electronics department. She lay motionless, her arms twitching. The fall had fractured her cervical vertebrae and severely damaged her spinal cord, leaving her unable to breathe on her own. Employees rushed to lift the box off her and called 911, but Carol went into cardiac arrest minutes later and was pronounced dead shortly after paramedics arrived. Investigation revealed her extensive return fraud scheme, with records showing she had illegally returned over $30,000 in merchandise across multiple stores using fabricated defect claims. Best Buy implemented new return tracking systems and policies to prevent similar fraud schemes, while Carol's death was ruled accidental despite her criminal activities. The incident became a training case for retail workers about the importance of following return policies while maintaining safety protocols, and her estate faced criminal charges for the fraudulent return scheme that had consumed her final years. It was March 15, 2017, when Vanessa Clay's relentless need to dominate every interaction would finally catch up with her in the most horrific way imaginable. Vanessa, a 42-year-old pharmaceutical sales manager from Columbus, Ohio, had built her entire identity around intimidating service workers and demanding special treatment wherever she went. Standing 5 feet 6 inches tall with perfectly styled blonde hair, she carried herself with an air of superiority that made everyone around her uncomfortable. Her weapon of choice was her expensive Hermes scarf, which she wore like a badge of honor while berating minimum wage employees. That Tuesday afternoon, Vanessa had already terrorized 3 different establishments. She made a teenage Starbucks barista cry over Fomart, got a McDonald's employee written up for allegedly slow service, and screamed at a Target cashier for refusing her expired coupon. Each confrontation was live-streamed to her 5,000 social media followers who encouraged her toxic behavior. At Westfield Shopping Center, Vanessa arrived at the jewelry store demanding a $300 return without a receipt. When the clerk politely explained store policy, Vanessa exploded into her signature tirade, adjusting her designer scarf dramatically while filming the interaction. The young employee called security guard Marcus Williams, a 28-year-old father of 2 who had dealt with difficult customers before, but never anyone quite like Vanessa. As Vanessa descended the escalator, she spotted Marcus below and immediately began her assault. Leaning over the handrail while maintaining her live stream, she screamed about incompetent employees and threatened to have everyone fired. Her need to gesture dramatically while filming and carrying multiple shopping bags created a perfect storm of reckless behavior. The Hermes scarf that Vanessa used as her symbol of superiority began dancing in the air as she waved her arms aggressively. In her rage-fueled tunnel vision, she failed to notice the fabric drifting toward the escalator's side panel mechanism. The moving machinery caught the silk material and began pulling it tight around her neck. For 45 agonizing seconds, security cameras captured Vanessa clawing desperately at the scarf that was now strangling her. The same hands she had used moments before to point accusingly at employees were now fighting for her life. Other passengers screamed and frantically searched for the emergency stop button, but it was too late. The escalator's relentless mechanical force compressed Vanessa's cervical vertebrae while completely obstructing her airway. Her 140-pound frame went limp as the designer accessory she had worn to intimidate others became the instrument of her death. Emergency responders arrived 8 minutes later, but Vanessa Clay was already gone. The irony was not lost on anyone present. The woman who had spent years using her status symbols to terrorize service workers had been killed by the very scarf she wore to establish dominance. Her final live stream, still recording as paramedics worked, captured her last entitled demands before the fatal accident. Marcus Williams, the security guard she had been screaming at, required months of counseling to cope with watching someone die while cursing his name. The incident went viral, but instead of sympathy, millions of viewers mocked Vanessa's entitled behavior with comments like "Play Karen games, win Karen prizes." Vanessa's family attempted to sue them all, but security footage clearly showed her reckless behavior directly caused the accident. The case was dismissed, and Westfield implemented new safety protocols including loose clothing warnings and additional emergency stops on all escalators. The tragedy became a cautionary tale about how toxic entitlement can have deadly consequences, with Vanessa Clay's name becoming synonymous with the ultimate Karen karma. It was November 11th, 2015, when Aaron Lockhart's elitist entitlement would trigger a deadly stampede at a Seattle Whole Foods that would crush her beneath the very people she despised. Aaron, a 44-year-old luxury real estate agent standing 5 feet 7 inches tall with platinum blonde hair, had built her career around exclusivity and looking down on anyone she deemed unworthy. She drove a white Mercedes and carried business cards listing her million-dollar sales to establish superiority over common folk. Aaron specialized in policing who belonged in upscale spaces, having previously gotten families removed from restaurants and demanding stores create premium customer lines. Her Instagram showcased her lifestyle while mocking poor people, accumulating followers who encouraged her classist behavior. That Black Friday morning had been productive for Aaron's superiority complex. She had posted stories ridiculing Target families, demanded a Starbucks barista be fired, and live-streamed herself lecturing a pregnant woman about shopping etiquette. After champagne brunch, Aaron arrived at Whole Foods emboldened by alcohol and social media encouragement. She had boasted about educating peasants about their place, carrying her phone to document confrontations for devoted followers. Aaron's signature tactic involved physically blocking customers she deemed unworthy from accessing premium products while filming encounters. She used her height, designer clothes, and condescending tone to make families feel unwelcome in her territory. When the Rodriguez family approached the last organic turkey, Aaron swooped in like a predator. She began her tirade about being a premium customer while filming the family, particularly targeting the elderly grandmother who moved slowly and spoke limited English. Unable to accept that common people deserved the same products, Aaron physically grabbed the turkey while screaming about organic standards. When Mrs. Rodriguez maintained her grip, Aaron's entitled rage reached dangerous levels. In her fury to wrestle the turkey away while filming, Aaron made aggressive backward movements near the olive oil display. Her designer heels and alcohol-impaired balance made her increasingly erratic, as she refused releasing either turkey or phone. Aaron's violent struggling caused her to fall backward into stacked olive oil bottles, creating a devastating domino effect. Glass exploded as multiple shelving units collapsed, the sound echoing like gunshots. Panicked shoppers, thinking they were under attack, rushed toward exits in a human stampede. Aaron lay trapped beneath fallen shelving and broken glass as terrified customers trampled over her during their desperate escape. The 140-pound agent suffered severe carotid artery lacerations from shattered glass, while sustaining massive skull trauma from falling canned goods. Approximately 15 customers stepped on her body, crushing her ribcage and puncturing her lungs. Aaron's final moments were spent clutching the organic turkey she died fighting for, her blood mixing with olive oil on the floor. Her phone continued recording the chaos she created, capturing her own death. Paramedics found Aaron in cardiac arrest with massive blood loss. 20 minutes of resuscitation failed as she had lost too much blood from her severed artery. Security footage showing Aaron's entitled behavior causing the stampede went viral. Online reactions were brutal, with comments flooding social media mocking her death over groceries. 3 customers required hospitalization for stampede injuries. The Rodriguez family received death threats from Aaron's followers until accounts were deactivated, requiring police protection. Whole Foods implemented crowd control measures and reinforced shelving. Aaron's firm discovered her history of discriminating against clients, leading to investigations and her name being removed from properties. Aaron Lockhart's death became a cautionary tale about how classist entitlement can have deadly consequences. It was June 3, 2018, and the original Starbucks location in Seattle's Pike Place Market buzzed with its usual mix of tourists and coffee enthusiasts. The historic coffeehouse's exposed brick walls and vintage fixtures created an authentic atmosphere, while baristas worked behind the curved counter, crafting drinks for customers who lined up to experience the birthplace of the global coffee empire. The afternoon crowd included business professionals, students, and social media influencers documenting their Seattle experience for their followers. Jennifer Clark positioned herself strategically near the pickup counter, her phone already live streaming to her 1,200 followers as she prepared for what she expected to be her most viral confrontation yet. At 35, the social media manager had built her online presence by posting daily videos of herself, exposing poor customer service and confronting workers who failed to meet her standards. Her Instagram account featured dozens of videos showing her berating minimum wage employees, while her followers cheered her on in the comments. Jennifer had developed a systematic approach to creating viral content, deliberately ordering complicated custom drinks and then escalating minor mistakes into major confrontations. She carried a ring light and phone tripod to ensure professional quality footage of her public meltdowns, treating each incident like a carefully choreographed performance designed to generate maximum engagement and outrage. Her complicated order, a venti iced skinny vanilla latte with oat milk, extra foam, light ice, 2 pumps of sugar-free vanilla, and cinnamon powder, had been prepared by a nervous teenage barista who accidentally used regular vanilla syrup instead of sugar-free. Jennifer saw this as the perfect opportunity to create content that would trend across multiple platforms while simultaneously destroying the young employee's confidence. Jennifer climbed onto a wooden chair and then onto a small cafe table to get the perfect camera angle, while live streaming her tirade about unacceptable service standards to her growing audience. Her followers flooded the chat with fire emojis and encouragement as she gestured wildly, pointing at the terrified barista while delivering a scathing monologue about millennial work ethic and customer service failures. The antique cafe table, designed for coffee cups rather than supporting a 140-pound adult, began to wobble under Jennifer's animated movements. She was so focused on her performance and the positive feedback from her livestream audience that she ignored the creaking sounds and unstable surface beneath her feet. The table collapsed suddenly, sending Jennifer crashing into the antique glass pastry display case below. The impact shattered the old glass into large, jagged shards, one of which sliced deep into her neck and severed her carotid artery. Blood sprayed across the white tile floor as her phone continued live streaming, hundreds of followers watching in shock as her final moments played out in real time. The teenage barista, whom she had been humiliating, screamed and ran to get help while customers called 911. Paramedics arrived within 4 minutes, but couldn't control the arterial bleeding caused by the glass shards embedded in Jennifer's neck. Her live stream captured her final gasps as she died on the Starbucks floor, surrounded by broken glass and spilled coffee. Jennifer's death went viral for all the wrong reasons, becoming a cautionary tale about social media obsession and the dangers of treating real people as content for online entertainment. The teenage barista quit her job and required months of counseling after witnessing the traumatic death, while Starbucks implemented new policies about customer behavior and installed safety barriers around all display cases. It was September 8, 2018, when Danica Wells' road rage obsession would send her SUV flipping through the air at 75 miles per hour on Interstate 75 in Atlanta, Georgia. Danica, a 41-year-old corporate compliance officer standing 5 feet 6 inches tall, had weaponized her enforcement authority into a personal crusade against anyone who challenged her rules. Her black SUV was equipped with dash cams, custom horns, and compliance officer decals that justified her highway vigilante behavior. Danica specialized in policing other drivers like subordinates, having received 3 citations for aggressive driving while filming motorists for violations. Her LinkedIn showcased posts about holding people accountable and teaching respect to insubordinate individuals. That Friday morning had been productive for Danica's power complex. She had fired 2 employees, posted rants about teaching respect to workers, and was taking prescription stimulants without medical supervision, amplifying her aggressive personality. Danica's signature highway intimidation involved pulling alongside vehicles to scream at drivers while maintaining high speeds. using her corporate authority to justify dangerous confrontations. She believed her compliance position gave her jurisdiction over every driver. When a compact Honda merged in front of her SUV during rush hour, Danica launched into her highway tirade. She began aggressively tailgating while honking and flashing high beams, filming the alleged violation for social media content. Unable to contain her enforcement obsession, Danica pulled alongside the Honda at 75 miles per hour and began screaming through her window about proper merging procedures. She swerved dangerously close while gesturing wildly, trying to force them off the road. Danica's need to maintain her confrontational filming stance created tunnel vision. She became consumed with punishing the other driver, focusing entirely on her power trip rather than highway safety. Traffic ahead had stopped for construction work, with orange cones and concrete barriers clearly visible. But Danica was too obsessed with her enforcement performance to notice the dangerous situation developing. Maintaining 75 miles per hour while screaming about teaching driving lessons, Danica's SUV struck the concrete construction barrier with devastating force. The impact launched her 4,000-pound vehicle into the air, causing it to flip 3 times before crashing upside down. Danica's body was thrown around the interior during the violent flipping sequence. Her spine severed at multiple points while her skull fractured against the roof. Internal organs ruptured from deceleration forces as twisted metal crushed her 140-pound frame. Emergency responders found Danica's SUV destroyed and her body lifeless in the wreckage. Her dashcam footage captured every moment of her final road rage incident, showing her aggressive behavior directly causing the fatal crash. The driver she had been harassing provided witness testimony describing Danica's escalating aggression. Despite being traumatized by witnessing her death, they required counseling for survivor's guilt. Danica's dashcam footage went viral when released by authorities, showing her screaming threats while ignoring traffic safety. Online reactions were unsympathetic, with comments like "Compliance Karen couldn't comply with driving laws" flooding social media. Her employer faced scrutiny when Danica's history of abusing authority emerged. The company implemented mandatory anger management training for compliance officers and reformed enforcement policies. Danica Wells died trying to enforce rules on others while ignoring them herself, proving concrete barriers don't care about corporate authority. It was August 19, 2017, in Austell, Georgia. The summer heat lingered over an amusement park, where crowds filled the park with noise and energy. The rides churned with mechanical rhythm, but beneath the excitement there was an unspoken tension. Later that evening, the park would be remembered for more than roller coasters and laughter. Melissa Daniels was 41, a marketing consultant from Atlanta, known for her blunt manner and impatience. Colleagues described her as sharp and outspoken, quick to point out incompetence as she saw it. She had steady work with small regional businesses and liked to project authority in public. Away from work, amusement parks were one of her indulgences. She followed ride enthusiasts' forums, often boasting she understood how restraints and ride systems worked. Her relationship with risk was one of control. She believed rules applied to others, not to her. Roller coaster rides rely on layered restraint systems, lap bars, shoulder harnesses, and seat belts, checked and locked by attendants before departure. The ride Melissa boarded, a looping steel coaster, used a rigid over-the-shoulder harness with an additional seatbelt latch at the base. Operators required both to be secure before dispatch. Despite this, riders sometimes tried to test boundaries, pulling against restraints to prove how much movement was possible. That day, the coaster carried longer waits than usual. Temperatures were high, making crowds restless. Witnesses said Melissa complained aloud about the attendants moving too slowly during loading, mocking their efficiency. When it was her turn, she pulled her restraint down, but several passengers nearby noticed she deliberately pushed the belt aside, insisting she could manage it herself. An attendant gave a quick tug on the shoulder harness, but with a full cue pressing, the check was brief. A warning announcement played, reminding riders to remain secured, but Melissa looked unconcerned. The train climbed its initial hill with the sound of clattering chains. From below, the structure loomed above the park, Riders shouted and braced as the first drop plunged into speed. The train moved smoothly through twists and turns, then approached its first inversion, a tight loop that whipped bodies upside down. Security footage later confirmed Melissa had shifted in her seat, her torso not held as firmly as others. As the train inverted, her shoulders lifted clear of the restraint. The accident unfolded in seconds. Witnesses behind her saw her body rise as if weightless, then slip free. She flailed as she cleared the harness entirely, tumbling upward before gravity pulled her down. In full view of the row behind, she struck a steel support beam with crushing force, the impact audible over the screams. Her body fell through open space and hit the ground near a service path beside the track. The train completed its circuit, riders screaming both from fear of the ride and from what they had just seen. Some were hysterical by the time the cars returned to the station, hands trembling, faces pale. Operators halted boarding immediately while security rushed to the scene. Park medics reached Melissa within minutes, but her injuries were catastrophic. Records later showed she had died on impact, with no chance of survival. Her body was removed under tarps while crowds were quietly ushered away from the area. News spread quickly across the park, but details were scarce until the evening. The coaster was shut down indefinitely for inspection. In the days after, the focus shifted less to mourning and more to the behavior that had led to the fall. Park staff documented her refusal to follow instructions, and investigators noted that the safety systems had not failed. Back in Atlanta, her workplace acknowledged her absence only briefly. Colleagues who had often found her combative did not organize tributes, and no public memorial was held. It was March 22, 2016, and the dinner rush at Olive Garden in Fresno, California, was in full swing as servers weaved between tables carrying steaming plates of pasta and breadsticks. The restaurant's warm lighting created a cozy atmosphere, while the sounds of clinking silverware and conversation filled the 200-seat dining room. The kitchen operated at peak efficiency, with line cooks coordinating their movements in the choreographed dance of professional food service. Susan Martinez sat at table 47, her notebook open and pen poised as she documented every perceived violation of health codes and service standards. At 38, the insurance claims adjuster had transformed dining out into a full-time investigation, carrying sanitizing wipes, a digital thermometer, and a magnifying glass to examine food preparation from her table. Her purse contained printed copies of health department regulations and business cards identifying her as a concerned citizen advocate. Susan had been banned from 4 restaurants in the past 6 months for disruptive behavior, including climbing over a counter at Applebee's to inspect their ice machine and demanding to see food storage temperatures at Denny's. She maintained a detailed spreadsheet of violations and had filed 17 complaints with the health department, though none had resulted in citations. Tonight's visit to Olive Garden was part of her systematic campaign to clean up Fresno's restaurant industry. When Susan observed a server briefly touch the rim of a plate while delivering salad, she immediately demanded to speak with the manager. Her voice carried across the dining room as she accused the staff of flagrant health code violations and threatened to shut down the restaurant with a single phone call. The manager, trained in de-escalation techniques, politely explained their sanitation procedures while offering to comp her meal. Susan's demands escalated as she insisted on conducting her own kitchen inspection, claiming she had authority as a tax-paying citizen to ensure public safety. When the manager refused her entry to the restricted kitchen area, Susan announced she would find her own way in, to gather evidence of the violations she was certain existed. During a shift change, Susan slipped through the employee entrance and into the bustling kitchen, her phone camera ready to document what she expected to be shocking health violations. She climbed onto a stainless steel prep counter to photograph what she believed were code violations in the ceiling ventilation system. As she stretched for a better camera angle, her shoes slid on the freshly sanitized surface, and she lost her footing, tumbling off the counter. She twisted in midair and landed face first in an industrial deep fryer that had been left open during a routine oil filter change. Scalding 350-degree oil covered her upper body as she screamed in agony, the sound echoing through the kitchen while staff rushed to pull her out. The burns covered more than 60% of her body, and the superheated vapors severely damaged her airways. Paramedics arrived within 6 minutes, but Susan's injuries were beyond treatment. She died at Community Regional Medical Center 3 hours later, her phone containing dozens of photos of normal kitchen operations that she had misinterpreted as violations. The restaurant was temporarily closed during the investigation, which concluded that Susan had illegally entered a restricted area and caused her own death through reckless behavior. It was September 12, 2014, when Margaret Thompson's dedication to neighborhood standards would lead to a tragic encounter in Charlotte, North Carolina. Margaret Thompson, 55, served as an active member of her neighborhood association in Oakwood residential area. She embodied the quintessential neighborhood enforcer, the type who measured grass heights with rulers, kept detailed logs of minor infractions, and believed her interpretation of community standards was absolute law. Margaret possessed an unwavering sense of superiority, treating every homeowner like a potential violator who needed constant supervision. She took immense pride in maintaining community standards and spent her days ensuring every resident followed the established guidelines. That afternoon, Margaret had confronted 3 different neighbors about various violations she discovered during her rounds. Her first stop involved a family whose children had created chalk art on their own driveway. Margaret's controlling nature emerged as she demanded they remove the colorful drawings immediately, citing community standards. The Johnson family became her next target when Margaret noticed their garbage cans remained visible from the street 30 minutes past the designated pickup time. Displaying classic entitled behavior, she threatened them with a $200 fine for this violation. Mrs. Garcia's rose garden caught Margaret's attention next. The roses had grown 2 inches over the property line, and Margaret's condescending attitude was on full display as she loudly berated the woman, insisting the overgrowth was destroying neighborhood property values. When a neighbor suggested Margaret was being unreasonable, her defensive superiority complex kicked in as she declared herself the only person who truly cared about maintaining standards and threatened to report them to city authorities. At 7:15 p.m., Margaret began her usual evening route to check properties and ensure compliance with neighborhood guidelines. She carried her phone and notebook to document any issues she observed during her walk. The weather was clear but windy, with gusts reaching up to 25 miles per hour throughout the day. A local utility company was performing routine power line maintenance in the area, with crews working on elevated lines despite the challenging wind conditions. Margaret stopped beneath a utility pole to photograph what she believed was an improperly maintained yard. 30 feet above her, a utility worker was securing a power line that had been loosened by the persistent wind. A sudden gust of wind caused the worker to lose control of a heavy metal cable clamp weighing 8 pounds. The clamp fell from the pole just as Margaret looked up after hearing the worker's warning shout. The metal clamp struck Margaret directly on the head, causing severe head trauma. She immediately collapsed and lost consciousness within seconds of impact. Other residents and the utility crew immediately called 911 and attempted first aid while waiting for emergency responders. Margaret was quickly transported to the hospital, where surgeons performed emergency surgery to address her traumatic brain injury. Despite the medical team's efforts, Margaret died 3 hours later from the severe head trauma she sustained in the accident. The utility company responded to the tragedy by implementing stricter safety protocols for work performed during windy conditions. They also improved their equipment securing procedures to prevent similar accidents. The neighborhood association established a memorial garden in Margaret's honor at the local community center, recognizing her dedication to the community despite the circumstances of her death. New safety regulations were adopted requiring ground-level safety zones during all overhead utility work, ensuring better protection for pedestrians and residents in the area. Margaret Thompson's final day of neighborhood enforcement ended in an unexpected tragedy, her relentless pursuit of violations, ultimately placing her in the path of falling danger. It was July 11, 2015 in Bloomington, Minnesota. A mall was crowded with weekend shoppers moving between stores, food courts, and attractions. Music from kiosks mixed with the constant hum of conversation. On the second level, one of the escalators near the east wing was partially cordoned with a yellow caution cone, a reminder of recent cleaning. Most people diverted to nearby stairs or elevators, but not everyone chose to wait. Linda McClellan, 52, was a longtime resident of the Twin Cities and a regular mall visitor. She worked in property management, but was better known among local shop employees for her sharp tongue and short temper. Clerks recalled her demanding refunds or lecturing staff about service. Away from public spaces, she lived alone in a quiet apartment complex. Shopping was one of her routines, a way to pass time as well as exercise control in an environment where she felt she held authority. The escalator itself was standard for the mall, a 2-story incline of steel steps with rubber handrails and grooved treads. Cleaning crews often mopped them late mornings, leaving cones for damp surfaces. The danger was not hidden. Slips on moving escalators can lead to severe head injuries due to the sharp metal edges. Mall policy relied on clear signage and cones rather than closing the escalators entirely, expecting visitors to heed the warnings. That afternoon, Linda noticed a janitor finishing his work near the base of the escalator. Dissatisfied with the streaks she thought she saw on the steps, she made her disapproval known, raising her voice at the worker. Witnesses later described her as visibly irritated, muttering as she walked. Without slowing, she stepped past the caution cone and onto the moving escalator, still clutching her shopping bags. Other shoppers hesitated but did not intervene, assuming she would steady herself. As she climbed, her heel slipped on a damp patch of metal. The shift was sudden. Her weight rocked forward, then snapped backward as she fought to steady herself. Her shopping bag swung wildly, pulling her further off balance. For an instant, she clutched at the handrail, fingers scraping, before her grip failed. Her body twisted awkwardly as she toppled. The fall was violent. Her back struck first, her head snapping against the jagged edge of a rising step. She slid downward, limbs jerking against the moving teeth of the machine, each ridge scraping fabric and skin. A red smear began to streak across the steps, darkening as blood pulsed from the wound at the back of her skull. Shoppers recoiled, some shouting, others frozen in horror. A man shoved toward the emergency button. The machinery jolted to a stop, leaving her body half collapsed across the metal. Security and medical staff on scene rushed to her. CPR was attempted on the landing, but the extent of the head trauma was clear. The fractured skull had caused catastrophic damage, and she was declared dead before transport. Shaken shoppers were escorted away while staff draped barriers to block the view. In the days that followed, several mall workers were offered counseling, one janitor later admitting he avoided the East Wing entirely for weeks. Among frequent shoppers, the story spread by word of mouth rather than through official channels. Parents warning children to avoid escalators, clerks recalling the sound of her fall in hushed tones. Her family arranged a quiet burial at a local cemetery, declining press inquiries. It was July 14, 2015, and the scorching Texas sun beat down mercilessly on the asphalt parking lot of the Target shopping center in Plano. The temperature had already climbed to 98 degrees by 2 p.m., creating shimmering heat waves that danced across the crowded lot filled with shoppers seeking air-conditioned relief. The smell of hot concrete mixed with exhaust fumes from idling cars as families hurried between their vehicles and the store's automatic doors. Patricia Williams adjusted her oversized sunglasses as she surveyed the parking lot like a general inspecting troops. At 42, the real estate agent had earned a reputation throughout her neighborhood as the unofficial parking enforcement officer, documenting violations with the dedication of a professional investigator. Her silver Honda Civic contained a glove compartment stuffed with printed parking regulations, a measuring tape, and a notebook filled with license plate numbers of repeat offenders. Patricia had been involved in over 30 documented disputes with neighbors, store employees, and complete strangers over the past year alone. Her homeowners association had received so many complaints about her confrontational behavior that they'd issued her a formal warning about harassment. But Patricia saw herself as a crusader for order in a chaotic world, someone willing to do what others were too cowardly to attempt. The motorcycle caught her attention immediately, a gleaming black Harley-Davidson parked diagonally across two prime spaces near the store entrance. Patricia's blood pressure spiked as she calculated the injustice. One selfish person taking up 2 spots during peak shopping hours while families circled the lot searching for parking. She pulled out her phone and began recording, her voice dripping with righteous indignation as she documented what she planned to be her most viral confrontation yet. Patricia positioned herself directly behind the 800-pound motorcycle, her phone camera capturing every detail as she delivered a scathing monologue about parking etiquette and social responsibility. The absent owner would return to find their bike properly positioned, she declared, because someone needed to teach these inconsiderate people a lesson about community standards. Despite having zero experience with motorcycles, Patricia grabbed the handlebars and attempted to push the massive machine into a single parking space. The Harley's weight immediately overwhelmed her 130-pound frame, and she lost her balance as the bike tilted beyond her control. The motorcycle crashed down on top of her with devastating force, its full weight crushing her chest and pinning her arms beneath the hot metal. Patricia struggled desperately under the crushing weight, her phone still recording as she gasped for air that wouldn't come. The motorcycle's engine guard pressed against her ribcage, preventing her lungs from expanding while the scorching exhaust pipe burned through her blouse. Her legs kicked frantically against the asphalt as she fought to free herself, but the bike's position made escape impossible. A few minutes later, a Target employee discovered Patricia's body still trapped beneath the motorcycle, her phone's battery finally dead after recording her entire ordeal. Security footage revealed her confident approach and fatal miscalculation, while her final video showed the moment her parking lot vigilantism turned deadly. The motorcycle's owner returned to find police tape and paramedics, completely unaware that his parking choice had inadvertently caused a death. Patricia's story became a viral cautionary tale about the dangers of taking justice into your own hands. It was August 3, 2018, when Jillian Frost's corporate entitlement would send her plummeting to her death in a Denver parking garage. Jillian, a 38-year-old HR director standing 5 feet 4 inches tall, had spent her career wielding power over employees like a weapon. She drove a pristine white BMW SUV that she used to intimidate anyone she deemed beneath her social status, always carrying business cards listing her corporate title to establish dominance over service workers. That Tuesday morning had already been a disaster for Jillian. After being denied a promotion she felt entitled to, she embarked on a revenge shopping spree to soothe her wounded ego. She had already screamed at a gas station attendant over pump speed, demanded a Subway manager fire an employee over sandwich assembly, and posted Instagram stories mocking what she called incompetent minimum wage workers. At the Target parking garage, Jillian's entitled rage reached a boiling point. She spent 20 minutes aggressively honking at families and elderly shoppers while filming them through her windshield. Her social media followers ate up her content titled "Teaching Parking Lot Etiquette to Peasants," encouraging her increasingly toxic behavior. When Jillian spotted the Martinez family loading groceries, she immediately pulled behind them and began laying on her horn. The family included 78-year-old grandmother Maria Martinez, who moved slowly with her walker due to arthritis. This fueled Jillian's impatience as she filmed while screaming about important people having jobs to get to. Unable to contain her corporate Karen rage, Jillian exploded from her vehicle like a woman possessed. She began her signature intimidation routine, stepping backward onto the concrete safety barrier to gain height advantage while filming and threatening to have the entire family arrested for obstruction. The 42-inch concrete barrier had been weakened by recent construction work, though it appeared solid. As Jillian gestured wildly while maintaining her confrontational stance, the compromised structure couldn't support her aggressive movements. Her 135-pound frame, combined with violent gesturing, caused the barrier to give way completely. Jillian plummeted 35 feet headfirst onto the asphalt below, her designer heels flying off during the fall. The impact was devastating. Her skull fractured in multiple places while her spine severed at the C2 vertebrae. Brain matter scattered across the pavement as her body went into immediate cardiac arrest. The Martinez family watched in horror as the woman terrorizing them just seconds before lay motionless in a growing pool of blood. Maria Martinez, despite being the target of Jillian's final tirade, called 911 with shaking hands. Paramedics arrived within 6 minutes, but Jillian was gone. Her phone, still clutched in her death grip, contained the final video of her entitled behavior causing her demise, showing her stepping onto the barrier while screaming threats before capturing her fatal fall. The parking garage was immediately closed for inspection, revealing multiple safety violations. Target faced a $2.3 million OSHA fine. though reduced when investigators determined Jillian's reckless behavior contributed significantly to the barrier failure. Online reactions were overwhelmingly unsympathetic. Comments flooded social media with phrases like, "She literally died mad about a parking space," and "Corporate Karen meets concrete reality." Her employer quietly restructured their HR department. After her history of workplace bullying emerged during the investigation, the Martinez family, traumatized by witnessing the death, received counseling and a settlement. Grandmother Maria developed severe anxiety about public spaces, forever haunted by being someone's final victim before their demise. Gillian Frost's death became a cautionary tale, proving that gravity doesn't care about your corporate title or entitled attitude. It was October 8, 2015, when Susan Rodriguez's dedication to her children's education would lead to an unthinkable tragedy at Lincoln Middle School in Boise, Idaho. Susan Rodriguez was the kind of parent every school administrator dreaded encountering. The 43-year-old mother had developed a reputation as the school's most demanding and theatrical complainant, someone who seemed to thrive on creating drama and making scenes to get her way. While she claimed to advocate for students, her real motivation appeared to be the attention and sense of power she gained from intimidating school staff and disrupting normal operations. That evening, Susan had arrived a full 90 minutes before the scheduled school board meeting. True to form, she immediately launched into her attention-seeking routine, cornering the principal and demanding immediate changes to the lunch menu while threatening media exposure over food quality concerns. Her voice echoed through the hallways as she criticized the school's technology policies in front of other parents, performing for her audience as she declared the administration was failing their children and demanded a complete policy overhaul. When staff reminded her the meeting hadn't officially begun, Susan dramatically insisted her concerns were too important to wait. With her usual flair for theatrics, she demanded an immediate audience with the superintendent, pulling out her phone to film herself making accusations against school staff. These videos quickly found their way to social media, where she claimed the school was covering up serious issues, another calculated move in her ongoing campaign to position herself as the school's self-appointed watchdog. What Susan didn't fully grasp was the dangerous environment surrounding her that evening. Lincoln Middle School was in the midst of major renovations, with scaffolding and construction equipment scattered throughout the building. Construction workers had spent the day installing new lighting fixtures in the ceiling above the main hallway where Susan now stood. At 6:20 p.m., as Susan reviewed her presentation materials in the hallway outside the meeting room, she heard an ominous cracking sound from above. The renovation work had weakened a section of the ceiling tile, and the combination of the new lighting fixture's weight and compromised structural integrity created a deadly hazard. The ceiling tile, along with a heavy light fixture, plummeted approximately 12 feet from above. Susan had no time to react as the debris struck her head and shoulder with devastating force. The impact knocked her unconscious immediately, causing a fractured skull and severe neck injury. Other parents and school staff rushed to help, calling 911 within minutes. Susan was quickly transported to the hospital where medical teams fought to save her life. Despite their efforts, she succumbed to complications from her head injury 2 days later. The investigation that followed revealed a sobering truth. Proper safety protocols had not been followed during the renovation work. The school district was forced to confront the reality that its oversight had contributed to a preventable tragedy. Susan's death sparked immediate changes. The school was temporarily closed for comprehensive safety inspections, and the district implemented new safety requirements for all construction work in occupied buildings. Her family, channeling their grief into purpose, worked with the district to establish safety guidelines that were adopted district-wide. Susan Rodriguez's story serves as a stark reminder that even the most routine activities can turn deadly when safety protocols are ignored. Her legacy lives on in the enhanced safety measures that now protect countless other parents and students throughout the district. It was July 4th, 2019, when Natalia Brooks' obsession with neighborhood control would send her drowning to the bottom of a Miami pool during what should have been a patriotic celebration. Natalia, a 39-year-old homeowners association president, standing 5 feet 3 inches tall, had transformed her HOA position into a personal dictatorship. She drove a white golf cart equipped with cameras and citation books, patrolling the neighborhood like a military commander, enforcing martial law on suburban families. Natalia's Facebook group, Violation Reporting, had over 200 members who encouraged her surveillance tactics. She had installed security cameras to monitor neighbors and was notorious for filming residents during private moments, posting footage online with rants about property values. That Independence Day morning had been productive for Natalia's authoritarian agenda. She had issued citations for excessive patriotic decorations, filmed families for noise violations involving children playing, and posted Facebook rants about inconsiderate neighbors destroying property values. After consuming wine while patrolling, Natalia spotted cars at the Johnson family's pool party. Her alcohol-fueled authority kicked into overdrive as she began filming while screaming about unauthorized gatherings and parking violations. Natalia's signature tactic involved walking backward while maintaining aggressive eye contact during confrontations, a psychological dominance play perfected through years of neighborhood harassment. This move had intimidated dozens of residents into submission. Arriving at the pool party in business attire with her clipboard, Natalia crashed through the gate, screaming about illegal gatherings while filming terrified children and families trying to enjoy their holiday. Unable to contain her HOA authority complex, Natalia began confronting guests about parking. She walked backward along the pool's edge to maintain her intimidating stare while screaming about running the neighborhood and demanding respect. To establish maximum dominance, Natalia stepped onto the decorative stone coping surrounding the pool. The stones had become slippery from splashing water, but Natalia was too focused on her power performance to notice the dangerous surface. As Natalia gestured wildly with her clipboard while walking backward, her business heels lost traction on the wet stone. Her 130-pound frame tumbled backward into the 8-foot deep end, still wearing her heavy business suit and leather shoes. The waterlogged clothing immediately dragged Natalia downward as she thrashed frantically. Her clipboard floated beside her as she struggled desperately, unable to swim and weighed down by her authority costume that became a death trap. Party guests initially thought Natalia was staging another dramatic confrontation. By the time they realized the situation was genuine, she had been underwater for over 3 minutes. Natalia suffered drowning-induced cardiac arrest as pool water filled her lungs. Her final moments were spent clawing at the water while her clipboard sank beside her, the symbol of her tyranny becoming waterlogged evidence. Emergency responders arrived within 8 minutes, but Natalia was dead at the pool bottom. Her body was recovered, still clutching HOA violation forms, the papers she used to terrorize neighbors now dissolved into illegible pulp. The community's reaction was notably unsympathetic, with neighbors privately expressing relief. The Johnson family faced no consequences as the party was within the ordinances and Natalia had been trespassing. Natalia's HOA position was dissolved and the neighborhood association was restructured to prevent future harassment. Her Facebook group was deactivated after members began celebrating her death. The incident led to statewide HOA reforms limiting president's authority. Natalia Brooks's death became a cautionary tale about how power-hungry behavior can literally drag you under. It was November 18, 2014, and the fluorescent lights of the Jacksonville Walmart Supercenter buzzed overhead as Black Friday shoppers began their early holiday preparations. The massive 180,000-square-foot store hummed with activity as customers navigated aisles stocked with seasonal merchandise, while cashiers prepared for the upcoming shopping frenzy. The customer service desk already showed signs of stress with returns and exchanges, creating long lines of frustrated shoppers. Linda Davis wheeled her overflowing shopping cart toward the checkout lanes, followed by 3 additional carts she had strategically positioned throughout the store during her 6-hour shopping expedition. At 39, the part-time bookkeeper had transformed extreme couponing into a full-time obsession, spending over 40 hours per week organizing deals and planning elaborate shopping trips that she documented on her blog. Her dining room table had been converted into a coupon command center with filing systems that would impress corporate accountants. Linda had been banned from 3 other Walmart locations for aggressive behavior during coupon disputes, including a 2-hour standoff over expired manufacturer coupons and a physical altercation with a cashier who questioned her coupon authenticity. She carried a 3-ring binder containing 847 coupons for today's trip, organized by product category and expiration date, expecting to pay less than $50 for over $2,000 worth of merchandise. Her husband had threatened divorce twice over her coupon obsession, particularly after she converted their guest bedroom into a storage facility for her inventory. Linda's blog followers worshipped her ability to game the system, but store employees across Jacksonville had begun sharing her photo in break rooms, warning each other about the woman who turned simple transactions into hours-long ordeals. Her shopping strategy involved purchasing items in bulk when coupons offered the best deals, then stockpiling products in her garage until she could use them or resell them online. Linda's neighbors had complained about delivery trucks constantly arriving at her house, and her homeowners association had cited her for operating a business from her residence. The checkout process began at 4:30 p.m. and immediately devolved into chaos as Linda presented coupon after coupon while arguing about store policies with increasingly frustrated cashiers. 3 managers were called to resolve disputes over expired coupons, fraudulent manufacturer offers, and quantity limits that Linda insisted didn't apply to her. The line behind her grew to over 20 customers as her transaction consumed 2 full hours. Linda's voice grew shriller with each rejected coupon, her face turning crimson as she quoted corporate policy numbers and threatened legal action against individual employees. When the store manager informed Linda that 247 of her coupons were expired or fraudulent, she exploded into a rage that could be heard throughout the front of the store. She demanded to speak with the district manager and leaned aggressively over the customer service counter, shouting about corporate policies and threatening to sue the store for discrimination. Her 3-ring binder fell open, spilling hundreds of carefully organized coupons across the floor as she stepped onto a small platform behind the counter to get a better view. Linda lost her footing on the wet surface, slipped on promotional flyers scattered across the platform, and fell backward, striking her head on the concrete floor with a sickening crack that silenced the entire checkout area. Her skull fractured on impact, causing massive brain hemorrhaging as her carefully organized coupons scattered across the floor like confetti. She lost consciousness immediately, her body convulsing as customers screamed and employees called 911. Emergency responders found Linda surrounded by hundreds of coupons, many of which investigators later determined were sophisticated counterfeits. She died at Memorial Hospital from her head injuries, with police discovering over $50,000 worth of fraudulent coupons in her possession. Walmart implemented new policies, limiting coupon quantities and requiring identification for large coupon transactions, while Linda's death became a case study in retail fraud training programs. It was July 2, 2018 in Bakersfield, California. The afternoon heat pressed down on the city, shimmering across asphalt parking lots and roadside stalls. Families lined up at temporary stands to buy fireworks ahead of the holiday. Among the bright packaging and banners, one tent would soon turn from a place of excitement into the scene of a fatal disaster. Cynthia Lopez, 36, was known in her neighborhood for her quick temper and bluntness. A former cashier who had bounced between jobs, she carried a reputation for berating clerks and teenagers who crossed her path. She lived alone in a small rental house, often filling her evenings with TV and cigarettes. Independence mattered to her, and she prided herself on never being pushed around. In public spaces, that tendency often escalated into conflict. The fireworks stand she visited that day was a temporary structure made of canvas, stretched over metal poles, stacked inside with cardboard boxes of sparklers, rockets, and aerial shells. These tents, while licensed, always carried a margin of danger. Fireworks are composed of black powder, fuses, and chemical compounds, all highly flammable. Regulations required no open flames, visible signage for fire risks, and portable extinguishers on site. Even with precautions, a single ignition could turn the enclosed space into an inferno. That afternoon, Cynthia walked into the tent demanding a refund for a bundle of sparklers she claimed were defective. Witnesses recalled her voice rising as she berated the young staff behind the counter. The employees pointed to the posted signs. No returns and no open flames, but she waved them off. In her agitation, she lit a cigarette while still standing inside, the smoke curling above stacks of boxed fireworks. Staff pleaded with her to step outside, but she ignored the warnings. In her agitation, she dropped the lit cigarette near a partially open box of aerial shells stacked by the counter. The glowing tip rolled against loose paper wrappings and exposed fuses, which caught almost immediately. Sparks raced across the box, and within seconds the first firework ignited, spitting fire into the tent. Panic overtook the space. Employees and customers bolted for the exit, some pulling each other clear. Boxes exploded in rapid bursts, sending embers raining across the lot. Cynthia staggered back from the counter, smoke thickening around her. Witnesses outside saw her silhouette framed by fire, coughing violently, her attempts to shield herself futile against the spreading heat. The tent collapsed inward as supports gave way, flames feeding on every surface. Onlookers used extinguishers and water jugs, but the fire was too fierce, so they dialed 911. Employees dragged each other free, their clothes singed, but Cynthia never emerged. Firefighters arrived minutes later, dousing the wreckage under plumes of black smoke. When crews searched the remains, they found her body near the counter, collapsed against scorched debris. Investigators determined she had died from severe burns and smoke inhalation, likely within moments of being overwhelmed by the blaze. Neighbors who heard what happened said it sounded exactly like her, too stubborn to follow rules, even when the rules existed to keep people alive. Some remarked bitterly that she managed to turn a family fireworks stand into a war zone just by walking in. Relatives kept arrangements minimal, avoiding questions from locals who remembered her as a constant source of arguments. The fire department's final note focused on reminding the public that ignoring safety signs could put everyone at risk. Thanks for watching. Want to watch more? Click on your screen now.